Greetings, Lama.
Hello, everyone. Greetings, everyone. How are you doing?
Everything is great, Lama. Thank you. How are you?
Oh, I'm quite fine. Quite fine. Thank you, Lamajili. Glad to have you guys here for this strange talk about the Buddhist temple.
Hello, everyone. Hello,
Okay.
Lamala.
Hello, Chris. How are
Hello,
you
Julius.
doing?
Melly.
Hey, Joseph. How are you doing?
Hi, guys. Great.
Hey, thank you, Erickson. And there is it's the middle of summer. There is a lot of sun now. It's this summer was very strange in Argentina. It's not really that hot, but there is it's like it hasn't rained in the whole summer, so it's a little bit of it's a little bit dry. It's a little bit dry. The good thing is it's not as hot as other times. Most of the temperature it's around the 70s, right, in Fahrenheit. So it's bearable. It's bearable. But still, it's a little bit. There's a lot of sun. I'm having this because if not, the glare of the screen is going to kill me. Hey, excellent. Well, welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to this talk about the Buddhist table and the Ratnaketu Sutra. Before, as always, we're going to start right by taking refuge, and this is going to be, I think, a strange talk. It's going to be. Though both our talks today are going to be a little bit strange, but I hope you find it useful. Before anyone else asks, because this is going to come at some point, the version which I'm going to show you of this sutra. It's my own translation from Sanskrit. It's, as far as I know, the only extant translation from Sanskrit directly. But there's a couple of translations that are um, available, right? Which the main one it's this one. Let me just. It's from 84,000. So this it's if you like to read this sutra, this is a wonderful sutra. The only thing is that there are more chapters, and there are some slight differences between the Sanskrit and the Tibetan edition of this sutra. I'm going to focus on the fifth chapter, and of course, if anyone's interested, you can send me a mail. I'll be more than happy to send the chapter to you. But you're going to find slight differences also due to translation styles, right? And it's a very important sutra for all of Buddhists. So all of Buddhism. So I would say that if you can, if you like to read a little bit of sutras, and it's a very fun sutra. You should try it. You should give it a speed. Hey everyone! Hello, hello. Thank you, Benson. Thank you. I was telling everyone it's there's a lot of glare. It's a very a very hot summer, a very sunny summer. This summer that so I'm a little bit to reduce the glare. It's you're going to find also that if I move my face like this, there's a lot of glare coming from the screens from the sun. So no, it's just how sunny it is. So if you, let's do because it's still a Buddha Sutra. Let's take refuge. Let's generate bodhicitta, and let's do just 3 minutes of anapanasati of breath meditation to get us in the space to learn about the sutra and what happened tomorrow. So as always, we're going to take refuge, the old refuge because it's sutra with Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sangaya, Namo Triratnaya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sangaya, Namo Triratnaya. Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sanghaya, Namo Triratnaya. We generate Mojita with Om Bodhicitam Upadayami. And now let's relax and meditate for a couple of minutes to center ourselves and be ready to learn about this.
Todos los días voy a estar en la base, compañero. Y eso voy a repetir.
Thank you, everyone, for joining me in this small meditation space. Thank you. Also, oh, give me 1 second. I'll just stop this one. Oh, I forgot to close it and stop the timer. Let me just check. Here it is. Thank you again for joining this location. Hey, everyone who joined while we were meditating. And welcome to today's chapter on how Mara was made a Buddhist. And I have a small confession, which is that this is going to sound me trying to sound edgy. It is not. It is not me trying to play like a Rolling Stones song, "Sympathy for the Devil." But Mara, the Buddhist devil, the more I read about him, the more I like him. And I would say that I like him a lot more than a lot of online Buddhists that I tend to meet. And this is Again, not an effort to be edgy or something like this. But if you look at Mara as a figure, it is a very interesting figure. I would say it's one of the key figures, together with Ananda, Shariputra, and Moggallana, who's the key of at the time of the Buddha to make Buddhism what Buddhism is. No, for me, he's even better. He's not nor false nor something. And this is what one thing I want to address right now, Lamajili, which is it's not an adversary. It's strange because it's not like an adversarial potency or because there's no ontology in Buddhism. It's not like the anti-God or the anti-Buddha, right? But it's rather something a lot closer to us. So let me start by providing context to what we're going to read, right? Let's talk about gods in Buddhism, right? Though Mara is usually translated as the Buddhist devil in Western translations, he is actually a deva, right? He's actually a god. And you know that in India, devas do not mean essentially all benign beings, right? They're not necessarily benign or even nice. They're powerful. That's the main gist of it. And there is a spectrum of power, right? Just like, for example, in the Greek gods. When you think about the Greek gods, you usually think about the Olympians, right? The 13 Olympians with Zeus and Hera and Hermes and so on and so on and so on. But if you look at the different poems, at the different tales we have from Greece that make what we call Greek mythology, you find that there's a lot of other beings that are kinsmen, so to speak, to these Olympians, like for example Nereids or Titans who actually help the Olympians, like Helios, right? The sun god, so to speak. Helios is not one of the Olympians, and yet is one of the gods. Because being a god is less about having a particular kind of experience in those conceptions, but it's a more tribal thing, right? The Banyer and the Esther is a very Indo-European concept. The gods in Buddhism are very much like this, are a group of beings that usually look towards their own enjoyment. They're what we could gloss as the very powerful, right? Yes, Lamajit, I would say that the Titans are a perfect match for the Suras, right? Though the Greek Titans tend to be more on the losing side than the Suras. The Suras tend to still keep the fight going, right? There is no Hikantomaki in, as you know, in Indian thought, but actually the Suras like Shukra, right? The guru of the Suras, the planet Venus, they're still very much active, right? And also the gods are not so much beings as holders of office, right? As we could say, the president, right? Like the president of the United States, or the president of France, or the president of Argentina. There is one president at one time, but when we talk about Chakra, for example, the king of the gods, the one that in the Vedas is called Indra, right? Mahendra. It's more about the head of the gods of a particular place in Sumeru than a particular individual. Mara is the same. When we talk about Mara in Buddhism, usually we talk about Maras plural, right? Which are those beings that in a way impede or development or a way to enlightenment. The Mara at the time of the Buddha, Mara Papillas, called literally the evil one, right? That was Papillas mean, actually became enlightened at the time of Buddhaghosa because he took refuge, as we're going to see in this sutra, and then he practiced and became enlightened. So the Mara that we could call today the Mara, right? The head of the Maras, it's a god that has a job to do, so to speak. And one thing that happens if you start reading the sutras, especially if you read this, the Ratnaketu Sutra, you will find that Mara is not like a devil in the sense that we think of a devil, right? In Western context. I mean, let me, I don't know if we think, oh, let me say how I think. Again, I've never been a Christian, so this might be just my idea, right, of what most Christians think. But usually, when I hear people talking about the devil, I hear it like from three kind of sources: either Christians, especially evangelical Christians, Satanists, and people who are in this kind of Gnostic Luciferianism that are, for me, it's kind of adjacent to New Age, right? But that's just my opinion. So the Gnostic Luciferians, they're like, yes, Lucifer is kind of it's the Lord of Light and the rebel, and this brings us something. This is, for me, it's kind of too wishy-washy a theology, right? And also doesn't bear with most of the folklore there. So I kind of usually just let it slide. Satanists are, in my experience, most of them materialists, basically, right? It's like with a lot of paganism, in which people are atheists, but they do not believe. And you would say, hey, no, I know a lot of pagans that they believe, I don't know, about Odin or the horned god or Kerunos or whatever you have. I would do a particular contention stemming from my fieldwork and research, which is that the mode in which most pagan people believe in their own gods, it's different than the mode in which like a die in the heart evangelist believes in Jesus, right? It's not exactly the same. It's not like they think. I haven't met, like, for example, Nashatwar, who thinks like Odin and Freya and everyone else is like lives in Valhalla and they're trying to work as teleology and as soteriology to basically bring Ragnarok and renew the world. And it's a different mode. So the only people that I have ever met that really believe in the devil are evangelists, in my experience. And the way that they really believe in the devil, at least from my experience, is that there's like this anti-God. There's the good things and there's the bad things. And the bad things are like put into their mind by the devil, right? Like there's this devil, right? In a hell, and he's got like a lot of screens, and there is like the Joseph screen, there is a Raul screen, there is a Dave screen, there is the Fede screen, and he's like, oh, Fede is having too much virtual stocks. Let's tempt him with something, right? Oh no, Lucy, of course, of course. I'm not talking about the more folks, the more comparative kind of way of saying, okay, Lux Ferre comes from the Roman times, and it's been, I mean, in the general sense of what people, what we would call the common sense, right, of what people tend to believe about the devil. The problem is that Mara does not work absolutely in this mode. So if we talk about Mara as a Buddhist devil, he's not that. He's absolutely not that. So let's talk about Mara and how he appears in this sutra. I'm going to gloss and paraphrase a lot of the first chapters. So I'm not reading everything because it's going to take like 4 hours, right? But I want to give you the gist of how it's going. So the sutra starts with the Buddha teaching, right? The Buddha is teaching, in an assembly of monks. And meanwhile, the life at Sumeru goes just business as usual. Nobody really cares. Every one of the gods is trapped in their enjoyment, right? That's the fault of the gods. Some gods like to fight, some gods like to have sex, some gods like money, and they're just all focused on that. All focused on that except Mara. And Mara, it's someone who's listening a little bit to the world, keeping his ear to the ground, so to speak, and starts hearing about this guy, Buddha. Now, Mara lives near India, right? Sumera usually is associated with the Himalayan mountains. So he is already accustomed in this time to hear 1,000 teachers and gurus that go preaching a kind of enlightenment. But he starts getting concerned about what he hears from the Buddha, about what he hears about emptiness, about bodhicitta, right? About anatman and how this affects society. So he starts getting concerned. And the first thing he does, he goes to the gods and he's like, hey guys, did you hear this guy, Gautama Shakyamuni, who's there like teaching? And the gods are like, where? In India. India is full of teachers and saints and gurus, right? Like, who has time for that? And he's like, but I think we should be concerned a little bit, right? He's talking about things that could break samsara. And the gods are like, no, Mara, you're being paranoid, you know? This is never going to happen. It's like, don't be nervous. And Mara is like, okay, but you know that we require like worshippers for them to burn the offerings, and this also has to do with caste and how society is organized. And everyone's like, no, Mara, you like, why are you getting so hung up? We're a powerful god, you know, relax, enjoy life. But Mara is not convinced, right? So he goes back to his own like palace, and there's a lot of minor gods. There's his daughters, there are his armies, everyone else, and they all like enjoyment and they like parties and they like battles. And Mara is kind of sitting there brooding, and they're like, "Father, what ails you? What is the problem?" And he tells them, "I'm worried about this guy. I keep hearing right, like this Gautama Shakyamuni who's going from place to place." Teaching about emptiness, teaching about bodhicitta, teaching about compassion. And they all look at him and they basically start laughing. It's like, are you doting, father? Are you in your old age? What is worrying? It's like one other guy preaching salvation in India. Like, then listen. And Mara's like, no, you have to understand me. This is because Mara is the only guy who's perceptive enough in the whole of samsara. Yes, exactly. He sounds very real. He's the guy who is one of these guys who are cursed, is one in every organization, right? In any major organization, you have like the CEO and the leaders who are more like general policy guys. And you have the guy who does all the work, but there is one guy at least in every organization who starts thinking, is this the best way to do things? Is this the most efficient way? What if the legislation changes? How does it affect us, right? Mara is that guy. Mara is that guy. In a way, and I'm not saying anything bad because I'm saying good things about Mara, right? In a way, he's kind of the Elon Musk of everything here. In that he's a guy who is not like 100% accepted. He's always been weird, but also he's also being respected because he has this kind of weird approach to things. So Mara is the one who actually cares enough to go and start testing these things, right? Who's the one like, we should have rockets at this point. He's like one saying, and flying cars and everyone's like, yeah, but we have other things to do. Mara's the one who actually goes and does. Again, not saying anything good or bad about Elon Musk. It's just a little bit of an analogy, right? So he started listening. And what is the Buddha's teaching in the first chapters, right? So what the Buddha is saying is, hey, abandon everything that's wrong. Hey, start thinking about the karma that enslaves you. Basic Buddhist stuff, right? And then what he does is Mara says, okay, this is probably let's this. Perhaps I am a little bit like paranoid. So he goes. He goes to the Buddha's teachings, and he appears. and he started to talk with the monks, right? And talks to the people there, and he tries to bring them his own perspective in disguise, right? So he goes and he tries to say, and I will copy it here. He tries to kind of throw the earth into the Buddha, kind of run a campaign on him, right? He says, quickly indulge in sensual pleasures, find your enjoyment. There is no death, there's no birth, there's no suffering of old age, there's no other world for you, there's no fruit of karma, no cause and action here. The son of the Sakyas speaks for gain, do not go with him with fate. Essentially, he's saying, relax, like the creed of the Devas, right? Relax, enjoy, just enjoy. There's nothing there. This is something very strange. It's something very strange. There was today a post by a particular teacher who I'm not going to name, right? I'm not going to name because he's a very well known teacher, but he's one of these teachers that kind of just want to go straight into the highest teachings, into Dzogchen, and they're like, you don't need to meditate, you don't need. Yeah, he won't be named. Not because I think he's a bad person, but I think that it's not really good. It's not really good to teach this, right? And they posted here.
What did they post?
Let me just post it here. I'm not going to say who, of course, but let's take this as an example. It's basically the same thing, right? What Mara is saying is, what the teacher is saying is, you don't have to feel responsible. You don't have to feel responsible, right? You don't have to feel responsible for things because there is no one there. And what Mara is saying is, there's no suffering, there's no old age. And if you look at it, they all may also be kind of like, it's framed the way that Mara says, because Mara is very smart. It says that this is Buddhism, right? It's very close to Buddhism. Like there is no old age, there is no death. It just appears in the Prajnaparamita Sutras. But what is the reaction of the people there, of Upatiya Kolita, who are two arhats there? Two bodhisattvas. They say, this is Mara. If you don't understand the two levels of truth, this is Mara, right? What you're saying is Mara. And I just want to be very clear in this. I'm not saying that the teacher who posted this is Mara. I think he posted this with the best intentions, right? But there is always this risk of understanding emptiness in a wrongful way. And Nagarjuna himself talks about this in the 24th chapter of his Mula Madhyamakavatara. Says, if you teach emptiness before people are ready for it, what you have is the risk of understanding it. There's no life, there's no death, there's no karma. Just as Mara says, right? And therefore, people are confused. No, if you are in a very high level, if you are someone who can abide in Rigpa, then, of course, you don't have to worry about karma all the time. Of course. But unless you are there, you are at this particular level, this teaching is going to turn to poison. Sorry, Lama Jili, yes.
Lama, is it a deliberate way to confuse people by using the sutra?
No, the person who posted it is not quoting a sutra, right?
No. I meant if Mara says there's no birth, there's no death, is this not the sutra?
Well, it is in the sutra because it's telling the actions of Mara, right? But what Mara is using Buddhist language to basically confuse people, at this point, he's testing people, right? But what he's saying is, why are you so worried about life and death, about doing good actions, about purifying yourself in the gradual path? There is no life, there is no death. Just relax, do whatever you want, right? And if you look, I took this person's post. If you look, it's very much like that. It says there's no one responsible, right? Who's responsible? They say, but no one, right? You don't have to feel responsible. And the trick is the word feel responsible. If you had said in the ultimate level, there's no one responsible, and in the relative level, there is responsibility, that's a different thing, right? But very clearly, the bodhisattvas, when they hear this, they react. And they say, this is Mara. Because Mara is trying to confuse the two levels of reality. Does that make sense, guys? Yes, exactly, like a teacher. No, I'm not saying that in some levels, when one is at that level, that's perfect. But Mara is very smart. So he uses the language of what people desire, right? If you can teach people, hey, you don't have to do anything that you don't want. The only thing that you could do is do what you want. There's no karma, there's no effect. Nobody is responsible. People will like it. Huh? People will like it. Yes, Mara also can disrupt captions. Right, exactly. The trick is Nagarjuna. It's the holy Nagarjuna. It's the most important figure probably for me after the Buddha himself, and he's the most well-known Buddhist philosopher. He very clearly states this. He says, "Hey, do not teach emptiness to people who are not ready for it because they will abuse it. They will take it to mean I can do whatever it is." And it becomes, Nagarjuna doesn't say this outright, but I'm going to gloss it. Instead of the path to enlightenment, the path of being an asshole, just as I liked, right? Anyway, so it's a difficult thing. But what happens? Mara goes and tries this, and everyone is like, no, you're Mara, right? You're Mara. And then Mara is even more confused, and he's even more afraid because he tried to do a false flag, right? In the Buddha's camp, it fails. So then Mara goes back, and he's like, "This is very bad. This is very bad." And everyone's like, "Still relax, Dad." Oh no, yes, it's a very well. Mara is also that Mara is a Buddha now, so you should at this moment with compassion for Mara Papillas, right? But he goes back, and then he goes and he tells his daughters, "Hey, we need to act, right?" And then he does another thing. He tries to make conflict within the Sangha. So when Shariputra and Moggallana are going to talk, the daughters of Mara come and make flowers appear out of the air. So everyone's like, oh, they must be holier than the Buddha, right? But the problem is that when they start talking and they start praising the Buddha and start teaching, the daughters of Mara start believing and they start taking refuge. So now Mara has lost the credibility of the gods, but also he has lost his daughters to the Buddha Dharma, right? And the daughters of Mara, convert and ask the Buddha, hey, how we can do to, it doesn't fit quite the quote, so I'm going to skip the original Sanskrit and just get the transliteration. And essentially they ask the Buddha, how can we become Buddhas ourselves, right? So the Buddha teaches them, and they go back to Mara and say, we have taken refuge, right? And Mara gets progressively madder. He gets progressively madder, and he tries a lot of things. And this ends up with essentially a full-scale invasion of a city where the Buddha is teaching to kind of disrupt the teachings. But anything that Mara does, everything that Mara tries to do, it's never enough. The Buddha just keeps on teaching and does not retaliate. Yes, exactly, David. Mara's like feeling like right? Um, in fact, there is a moment in which there basically all the armies of Mara besiege the city where the Buddha is teaching and says, if the Buddha is to appear here, I will destroy every single being that listens to him. And I will hunt him and I will torture him for the rest of eternity. And the Buddha says, even if they all strove to destroy me, they will not be able to harm a single pore of my hair, as I am capable, even here, of defeating the millions of Maras, including this Mara with a retinue. So it's on. After that, it's on. And what happens? Mara cannot destroy the Buddha. Mara cannot destroy the Buddha. And let me just find the last quote. And in the end, all the armies of Mara became Buddhist. So Mara loses all his power. And here is when I say that Mara, I like Mara a lot better than some online Buddhists. In the sense that Mara, seeing that, understands that he has been mistaken. Because Mara may be what some people call the Buddhist devil, but he is honest enough to know that he has been beaten and he has been wrong. So that opens the chapter, which we're going to briefly go over, in which he converts. Let me just share my screen so you can see it. Are you seeing my screen? Yes? Excellent. So if any one of you wants it, you just let me know and I'll send this chapter. I always translate the original Sanskrit here. Then I usually like to chant the sutras. So I usually translate them so it's easier to read. Remember, I'm a little bit nearsighted. So I have to look a lot at Devanagari to see exactly pronunciation. So I usually just, for chanting, I translate everything here. And that then I do the translation in English. So at that time, in the Buddha field, hundreds of millions of Maras with their retinues approached the Blessed One and sat before him. And then the evil one Mara, Mara Papillas, having approached the Blessed One with folding hands, spoke thus. Blessed One, I go for refuge with the instant mind. Now, this there's a lot in the text that I use. There is a lot of missing text because it's a very old. It is a version that has been that was written in the times of the Pala Empire, right? So it's around 1300 years, and there is some missing characters. This is what I've been corresponding with a couple of scholars. This is what we think says, and in that case, when it says distant, it's because he doesn't do it because he's like, I saw him and became in love with you or became devoted. But he has understood that he's incorrect. So he does not want to go, but he's honest. So he's going to take refuge. So he says, quickly release me from bondage and instruct me in the practice of the Dharma. And we must remember, he is a god, right? He's one of the highest gods. So this is a lot to say. And at that time, all the Maras approached him. And the Buddha says, I do not prevent you from going and coming again. Take the path you know, go where you wish, right? It's not me that's preventing you, right, from becoming enlightened or not. It's you the one has to change. And Mara says, when I go to my own joyful realm, I see myself bound by 5 fetters, right? In this case, the 5 fetters are the 5 poisons and also 5 skandhas. So what it says basically is, I'm bound by Atman, right? And the Buddha says, all conceptual thoughts are abandoned by me, therefore I am liberated from bondage. What the Buddha is telling him, essentially, it's bodhicitta, right? It's the union of the compassion and the apparent aspect and the empty aspect. Because he does not believe in conceptual thoughts anymore, he understands their empty appearance. He's not bound. Violence has been abandoned by me, and I liberate beings from bondage. Then the Buddha says, the Buddha with his Buddha eye, observing in time Buddha field filled with beings dwelling on earth and sky, spoke thus. Having abandoned all doubts, remaining silent for that interval, listen to my word well with complete concentration. Essentially, he's telling everyone he is going to teach them. But what's interesting is this word, Buddha Shetram, right? It says that he's looking at them as if they were Buddhas already. It means the Buddha feels, right? So he says, rare in the world is the Buddha, the full enlightened Buddha. Extremely rare is the Dharma Sangha. And this is something that is very important in the context of this teaching. What he's saying is that there are more Buddhas than Sanghas that follow the Dharma, even though Buddhas are rare, right? And this, it has been kind of my experience. There are more people who I think they are enlightened than people who will actually take the time and the effort and all the problems that come with actually trying to teach people to be enlightened, right? Not only pratikya Buddhas who became, perhaps a person who practices by themselves becomes an arhat. Okay, but do they have in them also the simple grit of going through generating a system, an institution, a teaching, a transmission that liberates being? That's even more uncommon. Remember that the Buddha, when he became enlightened, he felt this temptation too. And Brahma, right, and Shakra appeared and told him, turn the wheel of Dharma. They asked him to teach. Because there's always this kind of temptation of, this is samsara, people are not going to understand me. I might as well just, practice. It just becomes great. Rare is faith and devotion. Extremely rare, it's the practice of enlightenment. So he's saying here that not only is faith and devotion is rare, but even better and even more rare is those who take the faith and devotion and put it into the practice of Dharma. And probably you have seen people like this, right? People who are very devoted to someone, but they kind of put their, I always call it the wall gurus. Because I knew this woman who in the south of Argentina who had like 70 photos of her with gurus, right? And she had a wall, which he called my wall of gurus. And they were like Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, Hindus, didn't matter. And I'm like, but what do you practice? No, I don't practice. I just have my wall of gurus, which is again rare and good. I'm not saying this kind of devotion is bad, but to have that devotion and put it into practice, that is the mark of the supreme practitioner. Rare in the world would be the protectors of the world, and likewise rare is hearing Dharma. Yes, Lamajire.
Did you look upon the pictures of moons with devotion, Lama, and some sort of visual practice?
Well, depends. Let's say that is a part of practice to regard the guru with devotion. But let's say that the guru goes and says, like, okay, this is what you should do, right? Let me put it in this way. One of the gurus that she followed was like Osho, right? He had a picture with Osho. And you know Osho, right? Rajneesh, the one from the 80s and so on.
Yes, Osho, the cult leader.
Yeah, right, that one. So, and I told her, oh, you're doing the dynamic meditation, the dynamic meditation of Osho. No. Or, but are you doing like this shouting meditation? No, nothing of that. And I'm like, but didn't Osho told that you should do it? Yes, but he's just my guru, he's there, right? And again, this is not a bad thing. But if the guru goes and says, hey, you should do this, right, to help all beings to become a Buddha yourself, and you do not do it, then it's not as good as it could be. Exactly, she didn't listen. Does that make sense, Lama Jillian?
Yes, it means that really wasn't her guru, because if it was her guru, she would have listened.
Yes, but that is a very high perspective. That's what I say. It's like the rare practice of enlightenment. If a guru teaches a practice of enlightenment and you think like that, that is great, and that is how it should be. But there are people who will be devoted to other people, and they still won't practice. That's the point of a Buddha. So, did they answer with this, Lamajili? Or
Yes, Lama, that's perfect. I
Okay.
just wanted to, I wanted to clarify if how stubborn this lady was, and was she real or not?
I think that her enjoyment in that case was more about having a wall of rules, right? And that's okay. That's okay. So, and the Buddha says, rare indeed is time when patience is practiced. In the world, rare indeed is the abandonment of evil thoughts. Rare indeed is the taming of the mind. Rare is the meditation of emptiness. Rare indeed is practice of enlightenment, as practiced by me before. So he's telling us what we should focus. We should focus on protecting the beings of the world, protecting of the world, of being patient, of living evil thoughts, taming the mind, meditation on emptiness, and the practice of enlightenment. Right? This is the path for Buddha. And I mean, this is nothing revolutionary regarding like Buddhism. It's one of the first things you hear. Like in Dudana, you know, Dudana, it's a sutra from the Theravada. He has this definition of what Buddhism is, and he says, taming the mind, knowing which acts are evil and let them go, knowing which acts are good and help beings, doing this. That's the path. That is basically what he's telling Mara to do here. Brent is saying, Osho has the most penetrating raptor gaze I've seen in a human. Intense. Yes, very intense, very intense. I would say that I do not like the actions of Osho, but I could totally see the appeal, right? He was not only very charismatic, but also he was very well read. And he was like he had a master's in philosophy, so he was very articulate, and always that is something that's very attractive, at least for me, right? So the Buddha says to Mara, I shall teach you this mere flower of Dharma. I shall speak to you by that which enlightenment flourishes. So he says, abandon the three defilements here, right? Three defilements of anger, attachment, and aversion, and listen to the teacher's word. You who spring of crossing the floods, abandon the net of craving. Establish yourself in the three liberations and the remaining three restraints. What essentially he's telling here is that we need to move beyond the cravings and the push and pull of samsara, right? Remain in the restraint of wisdom, of non-attachment, and of non-aversion. And that Raul is asking, what about equanimity? That is equanimity. To remain in the true restraints, that is equanimity. He says, shake off the completely those defilements that belong to the three realms. Essentially, all the worldly dharmas. Let them go, right? Here is one of the places where there's text missing, which says, for the purpose of worshipping the lineage of the three jewels, my feeling is that you should practice the ways of enlightenment. This is what it says in the Tibetan, right? You follow the path of the Buddhas. And if one follows the path of the Buddhas, one will be attain the peaceful patience that is freed from the three realms. And then he says, if you attach yourself to visible forms, devoid of the four meditations, and the four meditations have to do with emptiness. That is, if you apprehend forms and being as true existence, this will generate the four distortions. And the way to being liberated by that is to do four floats. Basically, what he's asking here is remember that everything is empty, yet apparent, right? Then he says, the skilled Buddha cuts through being's bondage of existence with perfect wisdom. Then he says, complete understand the five aggregates, and there's text missing in the Tibetan's version says, but they're filled with the gnosis, with jnana, right, of emptiness. Understand that the aggregates, the five skandhas, are empty. And by understanding that and generating bodhicitta, may you quickly reach before the Buddhas, having abandoned evil completely, you will cross to the furthest shore. You will become enlightened. What else too? Abandon evil friends and avoiding evil views. Remembering suffering of samsara, again text missing, to generate renunciation. But here is an important point, because this comes after the teaching on emptiness. So in the commentaries, there's a lot of commentaries about this. I'm going to go on one that is from Sapan, right? Sakyapan. So if we're talking about renunciation, right? We're usually giving up something. There is this story that Sakyapanita tells about people who travel to the Gobi Desert. You know the Gobi Desert, the one that's near Mongolia. Horrible desert. You get lost, you die, basically. It's very dry. It's very windy, terrible desert to be lost. That's the one that Marco Polo travels through when he goes to Pumlaykan. So within the Gobi Desert, there are some travelers who get lost. And they start to hallucinate and see mirages in the sky, right? And there is this, of course, mirage, right? This famous place called Harikela, which is a city of Gandharvas and Apsaras. Now, if you haven't seen a Gandharva or an Apsara, it's do you know what I'm talking about, guys? A Gandharva and an Apsara. Gandharvas and Apsaras are essentially the dancers and musicians of the devas, right? So what we're talking, it's like, let's say Instagram influencers, right? Whenever you see them, they're very attractive beings, very attractive beings. And when people are dying, they're starting to hallucinate these wonderful, sensual, beautiful beings of every gender, every proclivity. They all come to you. Yes, bards with charisma over 21. that's the thing, right? They come to you and they start giving you sweets and they start talking and dancing for you and singing. And then some beings, some Unfortunate or fortunate travelers, Sapan says, it depends on what your interpretation is, are saved just in the cusp of time. They have a stroke of luck and suddenly a caravan would go and find them almost dead, hallucinating, and save them. But the strange thing, Sapan says, is that for most people who are saved in the cusp of time, even when they know, even when they recover and they see that themselves have almost died, they always want to go back to that place. And they have the most wonderful melancholia for a place that they know that doesn't exist, right? How to give up samsara, if you are Mara, is to understand that your whole life that you have built with effort and with suffering, it's like Harikela. You feel the emotions, but they are not real. Yes. The problem is that unless you meditate and realize that it is not real, Raul, you will still get stuck in it, right? So the bar, what the Buddha is saying here, the bar, is saying, remember that this which you are attached and you, by extension, they are not real. There is no inherent nature, no substance, and no characteristics. Just as the six senses are empty, there is no doer here. And you may say, hey, Lamafed, you were just lambasting something that someone posted, then saying there's no doer, right? That there's no one responsible. You can do whatever it is. So what is the difference here? What is the difference? The difference is that we talk about the two truths. And the Buddha is saying here, there's no doer, after he said, where it is, abandon, right, the three defilements, establish yourself in the three liberations and remain in three states. So this is the essence of a non-dualism. It's not there's no doer. Because if there's no doer, who is established in the three liberation and who is remaining in three restraints? What is the Buddha is trying to teach him is, hey, there's no doer in an ultimate sense, but in a relative sense, there is a doer, and you have to abandon evil, right? In a relative sense, it's just as real as anything else. In an absolute sense, it is not. Does this make sense? This is very important because this is the core of the teaching, right? If you think that nothing is real and everything is permitted, this is a problem. If you think that everything is real and the only thing that there is what you can see and everything is mechanistic, that it's also a problem. It seems like they're contradictories, but the true non-duality is not thinking there's no person who does anything. The true non-duality is understanding that these two things that seem contradictory are not two things. They're not even one thing. Exactly. The two truths. The two truths. Just as Lamajiri says. And then he says, thus understand that the six sense bases, the ayatanas, that's the five senses and the mind, are empty. But he's not saying they do not exist in any way. He's saying they're empty. Observe this state, O you who are without desire. Those who know this are without agent. This is the unsurpassed path. What he's telling him in Sutra terms is know the nature of the mind. It's pointing at the same time with Sutra terms and with Sutra methods as Mahamudra and Dzogchen are pointing, right? He's not telling him there is no one. Here's the point, Raul. It's not because nothing is real, there's no doer. There are think everything is real, conventional, but empty of nature. And ultimately, nothing is real, but there's not one or the other, right? This is what the Buddha is saying. The Buddha is saying, you can see everything. You can hear me talking now. You can see the transcription, in your case, that it's coming up on the screen, right? This transcription that you are seeing exists in the relative level, but in the ultimate level is empty, meaning it is empty and yet it appears. That is nature of the mind. If you know that, if you can rest in that, that is the unsurpassable path. So what the Buddha is doing now, he's teaching Mahamudra to Mara. Does that make sense, Raul?
Yes, Mama.
Excellent. Absolute truth helps with what I think that absolute truth and relative truth, Joseph, are in a way antidotes, right? There are people who are geared towards a mechanistic way. For example, I have a friend who's a teacher in a Taoist system, right? Called Iguan Tao, a syncretic Taoist system. And he's always afraid because their understanding of karma is not ours. It's very mechanistic. So whenever something happens, has an absolute value of positive or negative, right? And if something bad happens to the person, it means that he did something bad. There's no give in their system. The teacher before him, there was another teacher. He had to go back to China to Taiwan, because he had cancer. And the problem was, if he had cancer, he did something bad. Even if he doesn't want to talk about it, if he had cancer, that's it. He cannot be a teacher. Right? For those people, absolute level truth is wonderful because it loosens up the kind of mechanistic way they have. Some other people are the opposite, are very like nothing matters, it's all made up. For those people, a more structured relative view of, but it's not like nothing matters, because if you get like hit by a car, you're going to feel pain, right? But if you lose everything and you have to go homeless, you're also going to suffer. So you have to care somewhat about it. For those people, relative is better. But to think of this as two poles, it's the problem in the end. It should be seen as just one thing. And not even one thing, right? So when he does that, the Buddha says, at the time, the blessed one obstruct the flow of merit, power, confidence. And so apart when there's a couple of words lost, but essentially this means like all the Maras took refuge and attained the concentration of samadhi of emptiness, right? In this Buddha field assembly of Maras, remember, of all Maras, there was attainment, there was enlightenment. So empty disappearance is a key phrase. Not two, not one, exactly. Chris is perfectly on the point. Brent asked, absolute karma sounds dangerous, a lot like another version of big God. Yes, exactly, Ben. Exactly, Brent. It's like sentences. Oh, you must have done something there, right? And this is very, at least in Argentina, there's a lot of people who right now are coming back to this idea of, oh, you're poor because you must have done something wrong, right? And this is one of the it's the opposite of, if I'm rich, this is because God loves me, basically. Thank you, Rixel. Exactly, Raul. That's two equals zero. And then he says, to the three equals, innumerable beings attain liberation. Then the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, the sage Yotirasa, delighted, having magically created a flower-covered lotus seed, approached the Blessed One. With folded hands, he says, having observed all the world create a bridge of Dharma in this world of moving and unmoving beings, having completely observed the field made out of beings and to Buddhas, it's the part that's missing, show the wisdom and means to those afflicted by defilements on the incomparable lotus. Having ascended, O Lord, shower the rain of Dharma, and with this ends the 5th chapter. And the 6th chapter talks about teachings for all the rest of the beings. But what happens with Mara? Well, Mara doesn't. Sorry. Mara does not get enlightened right away. Because, again, he's Mara. He has a lot of work to do and has a lot of things to purify, a lot of habits. And it's difficult because he's, a very powerful god. But even for powerful gods, there is hope. According to tradition, the Mara Papillas, by practicing this method, became enlightened 500 years later, which in a god's lifespan of 12 eons is like a blink of an eye, right? He went for a coffee, he came back and he says, oh, this makes sense. And then he became enlightened. So by this, Mara becomes enlightened, and by this, Mara becomes a Buddhist. So if he were still existing as Mara Papillas, you would actually have to honor him because he is also, like you, a member of the Sangha, right? But to finish and to wrap things up, what I find most interesting is that the way in which the Buddha taught to Mara is essentially the way in which you teach a very advanced student, right? What did he taught him again? On the relative. He taught him, abandon the 3 defilements, listen to the teacher, abandon evil, right? This is the relative teaching, and this is wonderful. If you know that something is evil, if you know that something is bad for you, abandon it. Right? Do not try to, even if you're Mara, the Lord of the Trayatrimsa heaven, with armies, if you know something is bad for you and bad for beings, abandon it. Abandon it. Don't try to dissolve it into emptiness, do something. Abandon it. It's easier. It's a lot easier. Then, remembering what samsara is, realize that everything is empty of nature, right? You keep both. You keep the relative level and you keep the ultimate level. And if you can observe this state, this is indeed the unsurpassed path. So essentially what he told him is just do Mahamudra. Abandon everything that's wrong and do Mahamudra. Now, is this what I would teach a student? No. And why is that? Because I'm sorry, guys, and this covers me also. We're not Mara. We're not this extremely intelligent and powerful God, right? That essentially has the ability to, in a blink of his life, become enlightened. We're denser than this. So, and I will lead you with something that His Holiness Sakya Gongma Trinchen told me when once I asked him, what should be I had this idea, right? That when you go to like a very famous teacher and they were your teacher, they will tell you like, this is the practice that you have to do in a second, right? They just see you and they're like, oh, you have to do this, right? And you do it and you get enlightened. That would be amazing. If that were the case, guys, I would have told it like 1,000 times ago. It would be wonderful if I go and tell you like, I don't know, stand on 1 foot every Tuesday at 3 a.m. in the morning for 2 weeks. And the second time you do this, you will become enlightened. And you go and you do it and you become enlightened. I would be the best Buddha ever, right? But he told me the truth. He told me the truth. He says, okay, for the very highest of students, they will become enlightened when introduced to the nature of the mind. Then for the highest students, there's just Guru Yoga. Then for those who are not as high, there is Traduction, Guru Yoga, and Tantra. Then, for those of low capabilities, there is introduction, Guru Yoga, Tantra, and Nondro. So I was like, this is my error. This is something you have to learn from me. Do not ever ask this question. Oh, then what should I do? Because what one does want to hear? Oh, you are the highest capability, right? What did he says? He says, okay, you do introduction, Guru Yoga, Tantra, Nondro, but also learn the sutras, just in case. And it is like this. It is like this. You have to start where you are. The good thing is the path is walkable. And guys, how to put this? If the Buddhist devil, if the Buddhist devil, the guy who had the most to lose in every single being in samsara, could become enlightened. Everyone here can. Everyone here can. And everyone here can do it in this life. So don't be discouraged. Just walk the path. The Buddha lies it very clearly. I don't know why there's so many people saying, oh, it's so difficult. Yes, there's a lot of texts in Buddhism. There's a lot of teachings, of techniques, but they all kind of boil down to the same. The thing that the Buddha taught in Dudana. Know what's bad? Discard it. Know what's good? Practice it. Help all beings. Rest in emptiness. And that's it. That's the whole of it. That has just one word, which is bodhicitta, right? So if you can, and if you like it, please join me in the dedication by the merit of this teaching. May all beings generate bodhicitta. If they haven't given rise to bodhicitta, may they give rise to bodhicitta. If they have given rise to bodhicitta, may the bodhicitta grow. If the bodhicitta has grown, may it become stable. And if the bodhicitta is stable and there are Buddhas, may they help all the rest of the beings in samsara until samsara itself is empty. Sarva Mangala. Oh yes, Brent, one of these, if you go to ask, say that's very much. I didn't know at the time. That's why I'm passing this morsel of wisdom. So, did you like this? Any questions about this sutra? Let me see if I can put the chapter here. So if anyone wants to just download it. I think I can. Hey, there's hope for everyone. And we all know you're no lazy bum, Erickson. But yes, there's hope for everyone. No, you're not dense. You're not dense at all. Don't worry. Don't worry. It's basically something I think that we should always try to see. And also, because there is this, sadly, I have been hearing a lot of these kind of stupid things about, oh, there is like the Buddhist devil and what could be like a Buddhist Satanism. It just is, dude. It's like if the devil had gone over to Jesus Christ and said, hey, how can I get baptized or something like this? That would have been amazing. Oh, yes, with a distant mind is wonderful. For me, it's one of the great phrases. Like, let me tell you one more story. One more story, folks. There is one story in which Mara goes to the Buddha and he says, look, you are going to die very soon, but I can extend your life if you like. And the Buddha doesn't want to say I want to live because this is going to go wrong counter to what he thought Mara, right? And so he goes and he says, let's do something. Let's ask the Sangha. If someone in Sangha wants me to live, I'll live on. Mara's like, sure, master, let's do it. So they go together to the Sangha, and he's like, people of the Sangha, your teacher, the Buddha is getting old, but Mara here has agreed to extend my life if some of you want me to stick around forever. And nobody answers. So he's like, perhaps you haven't heard. Have you correctly? I can be a little bit that sometimes. If you like me, to say you just like raise your hand, right? You just raise your hand, and that'll be it. That'll be it. I'll live here forever, and nobody answers. And he turns to Ananda and says, "Ananda, my beloved one, would you like your teacher and cousin to pass on to Nirvana?" And Ananda says, "I'm going to miss you very much." And this is wonderful. And the Buddha is okay. Then I'm going to teach you about impermanence and dies, right? That is one of the best stories I heard ever about the death of the Buddha, because in a way, it's like the distant mind. It shows you in a very, it must have been very intense to be a Buddhist in the time of the Buddha. It must have been a real roller coaster. So just as I can empathize with Mara coming after the guy who basically defeated him and boasted about it, he goes with a distant mind. I also can empathize about Ananda wanting to miss the Buddha a little bit, right? And no, Raul, these are not the play and daughters. No. This is like in general daughters of Mara, right? Well, the thing is, Brent, if you quote in Sanskrit, every consonant is conjoined with a as at the end, right? So if you see a K, you do different in English. For example, a Z and a K have a different end sound of vocals. I say K, you sing just letter K, but I say K, A, right? S, E. But in Sanskrit, everything is conjugated with an L. So I say ka, pa, 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 sa, right? If the letter is by itself, it's just na. So it's going to happen a lot. That's why sometimes when you see Hindi transliterated, you will find that the last a is omitted, right? For example, Garud instead of Garuda, right? Samsara instead of Samsara. This is not because they're not pronouncing it, but because in the transliteration, sometimes when translated into English, it's taken away. But it's a modern thing of it. Does that make sense? Excellent. There's a whole sutra about this, which is the Sutra Prajna Paramita in one letter, and why we use so much, basically. Well, everyone, if there's no other questions, we'll break for 10 minutes, and in 10 minutes I'll start the next talk if you'd like to go. See you around. Bye-bye.